They said Tanzania was calm, a country of peace, a nation that had learned to live quietly under the weight of its own silence. But beneath the stillness, something had begun to stir. A vibration, faint at first, then growing, spreading through the phones, the streets, the minds of its youth. For years, the government of President Samia Suluhu had promised stability. She was praised abroad as a symbol of reform, the woman who would modernize the system, open the doors of democracy, and heal the fractures of a divided country. But inside Tanzania, the youth saw something different. They saw a future slipping away while speeches filled the air. They saw power centralizing quietly in Dar es Salaam. They saw critics vanish behind walls of silence. They saw inflation rise while opportunity fell. And most of all, they saw a government that had learned to rule not by fear of violence, but by fear of invisibility. No one had to tell them to stay quiet. The system had already taught them how. It began online, where every movement in modern Tanzania is born. On social media, posts began appearing late at night under strange hashtags. Not political slogans, not manifestos, but questions. Questions that pierce through the official narrative. Where are the jobs? Who controls our future? Why are we always told to wait? At first, these posts were ignored, then deleted, then censored. Accounts disappeared overnight, users were detained, journalists were warned. But suppression has a strange effect. It multiplies curiosity. By mid-year, the whispers had turned into a pulse, one that even the state could not ignore. Across universities and small towns, Gen Z Tanzanians began meeting in quiet rooms, exchanging screenshots, compiling evidence of corruption, and collecting stories of those who had disappeared for speaking too loudly. They called themselves the Reclaim. At the same time, the government grew uneasy. Reports from intelligence units described youth unrest, online extremism, a blank white sheet of paper. No slogans, no chants, only silence. Within hours, the video went viral, first locally, then across Africa. To the government, it was an act of defiance. To the youth, it was a declaration, "We see you." Within 48 hours, arrests followed. State television called it a foreign-funded provocation, but the footage had already escaped Tanzania's borders. BBC Swahili picked it up, then Al Jazeera. Then countless independent bloggers who asked the same question. Why is the government afraid of blank paper? That question broke the dam, for the first already left the wires. It was now in the blood. By the end of the month, a phrase began appearing across walls in Dar es Salaam, Dodoma, and Zanzibar. Spray painted in violet ink, it read only, "We are not afraid." The slogan spread like a contagion. No one claimed it, no one explained it, and that made it more powerful. The government called for calm. State media spoke of isolated troublemakers, but intelligence reports told a different story. Tens of thousands of young people were preparing to march. The day had been chosen. The location was secret, and the world would soon see that the peace Tanzania had shown for decades was only the surface of a much deeper storm. As dawn approached, military vehicles began moving toward the coastal highways. At the same time, in dozens of WhatsApp groups across the nation, a single encrypted message appeared. It read, "Tomorrow we stand." It began on a Thursday, a morning that looked like any other in Dar es Salaam. Buses crowded, vendors calling, radios playing soft music about peace and progress. But behind the rhythm of routine, tension was thick in the air. The government had sensed it. Something was coming, something they could not name, but everyone could feel. Just before 8 a.m., in the heart of the city, the first wave appeared. Dozens of young people walked silently down Sam Nujoma Road, dressed in black, their faces uncovered, holding no banners, no flags, only their phones recording everything. The police, confused, ordered them to disperse, but the crowd kept walking. A strange, heavy calm hung over the streets. And then, from the rooftops and side streets, more appeared. Hundreds more. Within minutes, the city's rhythm broke. Traffic stopped, shops closed, and for the first time in years, the Tanzanian capital saw something it had long forgotten. Its youth uniting for something larger than fear. The government was unprepared. Every movement it had faced before was generations staring at the system that had ignored them. By midday, photos flooded social media. Despite the ongoing internet restrictions, the images slipped through VPNs and offline transfers, spreading across Africa within hours. The world began to notice. Headlines appeared in whispers. Unrest in Tanzania. Youth defy curfew. Government censored. Samia Suluhu's administration convened an emergency meeting. The official response was denial. No protests are taking place, but everyone in Dar es Salaam could hear the helicopters overhead. By evening, the silence shattered. As night fell, tear gas filled the streets near Kariakou Market. Security forces advanced. Cameras caught images of young people being dragged into trucks, others scattering through the smoke. But even as the city burned, no one could find the leaders, because there were none. This was the new face of resistance, leaderless, digital, and everywhere at once, 1,000 minds acting as one. In the chaos, a young student from the University of Dar es Salaam managed to upload a single message before his phone went dark. The message read, "We are not enemies of Footage from the ground told a different story. Armored trucks on campus roads, soldiers blocking bridges, hospitals overwhelmed with the injured. And yet even then the protests did not die. They adapted. In the following days, young Tanzanians replaced the streets with symbols. Violet ribbons began appearing on street poles, school gates, even currency notes, quiet reminders that the fire was still alive. People started leaving white papers on government buildings, a silent accusation against censorship. And at night, rooftops lit up with phone flashlights, thousands of them, flickering like stars over the city. The government called it anarchy, but for many it looked like hope. Within a week, the uprising spread beyond Dar es Salaam. In Tanga, fishermen refused to deliver fuel to military boats. In Dodoma, students staged sit-ins inside classrooms. And in Zanzibar, shopkeepers closed their stalls in solidarity. The movement had no logo, no slogan, just one phrase whispered across the nation. "We are awake." Every attempt to suppress it only amplified it. Every arrest added another reason to rise. And deep inside the corridors of power, fear began to take root. Reports leaked from government intelligence, officers warning that the uprising was growing, faster than anyone predicted, that Tanzania's youth had found a power stronger than control, unity. "If this continues," one report read, "the state will lose the streets within days." The next morning, President Samia Suluhu ordered Operation Safisha to clean, a crackdown disguised as order, mass detentions, media blackouts, and a campaign to erase every trace of the movement from the public record. But history has a way of surviving censorship. By trying to erase the uprising, the government turned it into legend, because somewhere in the smoke and silence of those streets, a generation realized that change would never be given. It had to be taken. As dawn broke the next day, the state announced that the protests were over. But satellite images told another story, thousands still, gathering quietly on the outskirts of Arusha, forming the largest unreported demonstration in Tanzania's modern history. And at the center of that crowd, a banner waved with 3 words, "We are the future." The morning after the government declared victory, Tanzania fell eerily silent. Internet speeds dropped to 0. Television channels switched to documentaries about tourism and wildlife. Newspapers went blank where political stories should have been. The blackout had begun. The official explanation was national maintenance of digital infrastructure. But everyone knew the truth. This was not maintenance. It was erasure. Every trace of the uprising was being wiped out. Posts disappeared. Hashtags vanished. Entire accounts were deleted within seconds of uploading. For a nation built on quiet obedience, the silence was deafening. But silence has a strange echo, and this time it came from underground. In the absence of the internet, an invisible network began to grow. Inside dormitories, church basements, and small cyber cafes, Tanzania's Gen Z built an alternative communication web. Old laptops were rewired. USB drives passed hand to hand like contraband, and in hidden folders labeled music, raw videos of the crackdown were stored. Footage the government never wanted the world to see. Clips began leaking through encrypted servers. A student bleeding on a university floor. A young woman being dragged by uniformed men. Each upload, an act of rebellion. Within days, the footage crossed borders, first into Kenya, then to Uganda, Ghana, and beyond. Foreign journalists began piecing it together. An unreported massacre, a hidden war, a government trying to hide the truth under the weight of its own propaganda. At State House, panic set in. President Samia Suluhu's advisors urged her to control the narrative. But the narrative was already gone, scattered across hard drives, encrypted chats, and human memory. The world was beginning to ask questions, and the more the government denied, the more unbelievable it sounded. On international networks, satellite footage began to appear, showing military convoys heading north, into Arusha and Moshi. No journalists were allowed in, no residents were allowed out. Officially, nothing was happening. Unofficially, it was a siege. And then something remarkable happened. At exactly 8 p.m. on the 7th day of the blackout, lights across parts of Dar es Salaam flickered. For 60 seconds, the city plunged into darkness. When the power returned, A single message had replaced dozens of government websites and billboards. We are still here. No one claimed responsibility. No one knew how it had been done. But the message appeared simultaneously in 5 major cities, from Zanzibar to Dodoma, as if coordinated by ghosts. That night, a quiet terror spread through the political elite. If the youth could penetrate the state's digital systems under a nationwide blackout, what else could they do? The administration launched arrests targeting IT workers, students, and even telecom engineers. But the trail led nowhere. The movement had no leader, no headquarters, no face. It was everywhere and nowhere. The blackout stretched into weeks. Banks slowed. Hospitals ran out of supplies. Tourism plummeted. And whispers grew that even within the army, divisions were forming. Soldiers, many of them barely older than the protesters. Those words spread quietly across the islands, carried by fishermen who ferried messages across the coast. The movement had found new strength in loyalty from within. By the 3rd week, fragments of the truth began reaching the outside world. International media published leaked reports confirming over 400 arrests, dozens of disappearances, and mass detentions in undisclosed locations. Satellite images showed scorched areas outside Arusha, places where the government claimed criminal elements had been cleared. But eyewitness accounts painted another picture. Entire neighborhoods surrounded, young men taken at night, women pleading for news that never came. Still, the government insisted. There are no protests. There is no unrest. Tanzania is stable, but the world could see otherwise. Because through the blackout, one light still burned. The courage of those who refused to forget. Underground editors compiled testimonies. Students recorded names of the missing. And hackers continued sending files out of the country, one USB at a time. Every day, a new piece of truth escaped. Every day, the illusion of control weakened. The blackout had failed. The government had tried to hide the uprising. Instead, it had exposed itself. By the end of the month, something began to change. Officials started resigning quietly. Foreign investors paused projects. Diplomatic embassies issued vague statements about monitoring the situation. And within Tanzania, whispers turned into belief. Belief that the youth had not been defeated, only delayed. The rebellion had gone dark, but darkness was its camouflage. At 3:17 a.m., an anonymous video surfaced online. Grainy, unstable, but unmistakable. It showed the Tanzanian flag painted with a violet circle in the center, fluttering over what looked like a government building. No caption, no location, just one line of text flashing across it. The government deployed new forces, but the resistance had changed shape. No longer was it a crowd to disperse. It was a current flowing through the cracks of the nation. Teachers joined. Nurses quietly refused to report students who sought shelter in hospitals. Even minor officials began leaking internal memos to foreign journalists. The uprising had moved beyond protest. It had become a consciousness. Inside State House, President Samia Suluhu's circle fractured. Some urged reconciliation, others demanded total control. But control was already slipping away. The blackout that was meant to silence had starved the economy. Markets crashed. Foreign investors withdrew. And in the slums of Kigamboni and the alleys of Arusha, people began surviving, without the state building their own micro-networks of trade and communication. They called it the parallel Tanzania, an invisible country operating beneath the official one. Its currency was trust. Its laws were respect. Its anthem was silence. For the government, this was the ultimate threat. A people who no longer feared punishment because they no longer needed permission. One night, foreign correspondents picked up faint radio signals from within the country, a broadcast on an unregistered frequency. A calm, collective voice spoke over static. "We are not the enemy. We are the children you tried to forget. You can delete our posts, but not our memory." The transmission ended with the violet circle pulsing on screen. No one ever traced the source. Weeks later, after intense pressure, the government restored partial internet access. When the networks came back, they were flooded, not with celebration, but with evidence. Thousands of photos, videos, and testimonies uploaded at once like a dam bursting open. Every hidden act of brutality, every disappearance, every lie carefully buried under the blackout, now visible to the world. International outrage followed. Governments demanded investigations. Human rights groups released reports titled, "The Days Tanzania Erased." But inside the country, the people were already ahead of the headlines. They did not wait for apologies. They organized. Community leaders created underground schools, teaching digital freedom and civic rights. Former journalists launched independent newsletters using foreign servers. And across the country, a new generation of artists, began painting murals of blank white pages, the symbol that had started it all. The blank paper, once a crime, had become a monument. The president's administration attempted to reassert power. She announced reforms, cabinet reshuffles, promises of transparency. But the tone had changed. No decree could erase what the people had seen. No speech could rebuild the trust that the blackout had destroyed. The uprising had no capital, no constitution, no flag recognized by law. Yet it had something stronger than recognition: belief. Official documents, few government statements. But they will find the violet circle, painted on walls and doors, carved into desks, drawn in notebooks. They will find a generation that refused to be invisible. And they will know that Tanzania changed, not with bullets or ballots, but with courage disguised as silence. As the sun sets over the Indian Ocean, the camera pans across the skyline of Dar es Salaam, half in shadow, half in light. The government hid the uprising, but it could not hide the awakening. The violet circle glows once more. We are the future,